I just wanted to say what an enormous honour it is to be awarded this commission. And I'd like to thank South Georgia Heritage Trust for selecting my work. I'm really looking forward to this project. My work is about landscape, and what more of an amazing landscape is there than South Georgia? I'm based in Angus in Scotland. I'm principally a sculptor or maker, and I fabricate works in a variety of media, such as wood and metal and plastics, even card and thread. I'm particularly interested in nature and landscape, but also the trace left by humans on our environments. I'm also interested in science and the character of geology and human impact on habitat. South Georgia is an island in the Antarctic or Southern Ocean. It's about 1,500 kilometres north of Antarctica and 1,500 kilometres east of the Falkland Islands. It's a British overseas territory, and it played host to the whaling industry, which existed there from the early 20th century to the late 1960s. And since the banning of whaling and the closing down of the 9 whaling stations on the island, and through really careful management and conservation by organisations such as the South Georgia Heritage Trust, among others, the island is now regarded by scientists as an ecosystem in recovery, which is a pretty amazing thing. Here was an opportunity to engage with a particularly poignant story, something I've personally worried about since I was young. I'm a child of the 1980s, so I grew up watching lots of Attenborough films and making things in my parents' shed. So here was a chance to connect the two. If I apply for a commission, I feel I have to connect with the subject matter first. I think when I was younger, I probably just applied for things thinking, an idea might come, but now I have to really feel that I feel it, I suppose. And this particular commission really was that for me. And I was kind of fortunate because I struck upon this idea quite early on. I always think that's a kind of lucky thing. And the idea just seemed to cascade, really. The site's really very interesting, and I think that's one of the reasons I responded to the brief. The site looks to me a lot like an old farmyard or a disused sawmill. It has lots of kind of rustic, patinated objects around. That's something that's crept into my work before. I kind of really responded to the colour of the site and the forms and the chaos of the site, because it is actually quite a chaotic site. I kind of like the idea of trying to unify that chaos somehow. And given that this was to be sited in the Flensing Plan, which is the large area in the centre of the whaling station, that's a particularly charged site, really. Quite a sad site. The title of the work, Commensalis, I've taken from the biological term commensal. This is a particular biological definition which defines a relationship between two organisms where both benefit and neither party are harmed, unlike, say, a parasitic relationship. Commensal is from Latin and means to eat at the same table. By using this in the title, I suppose I'm proposing this is how we ought to interact with nature and our environment. Perhaps we should all be at the same table. Quite early on in my research, I made the connection between the rivets which hold the site together, and of course many of the vessels. The site would have been flat packed and taken from Europe in the early 20th century, and I happened upon this idea the site's made up of lots of rivets, and that's what holds it together. But the rivets also resemble whale barnacles, and these are the barnacles that grow on the sides of the flanks and backs of whales. And they, certainly visually, formally, they're kind of similar. And This gave me the idea of using the rivet as a unit whereby I could express numbers of whales taken and also numbers of whales recovered. I wanted something that sat low within the site so that it didn't interrupt the skyline of the site. It is a heritage area. I'm proposing placing 6 large round steel tables in this empty flensing area, or the flensing plan as it was called, and I call them the spirit tables. The table's diameters are all vary, but are roughly between 5 and 7 meters in diameter, so pretty big. Each table will represent each of the whale species that were hunted and processed at the whaling station, at all the whaling stations in South Georgia. And I've hinted very subtly in the patterns of these rivets at the natural history of each whale. So for instance, the humpback whale is known to blow spiral bubble nets to catch krill when they're feeding. So the humpback whale table will have a spiral configuration of rivets. On each table, there will be a section removed or a negative cut with no rivets, which will correspond to the numbers of that species butchered. And these bare sections will then correspond to a 7th table, which will act as a key to the work. On this key table, there'll be a nightingale chart displaying quite accurately in rivets again the exact numbers of each species of whale culled. The nightingale chart being a slightly more accurate version of a pie chart. This was created by Florence Nightingale to communicate soldier casualties during the Crimean War. This is the model for the Sai whale spirit table, and as you can see, there's a kind of random pattern of rivets on this, and you can quite clearly see the negative cut, which refers back to the Nightingale chart in the key table. And around the very edge of this table, I'm going to include information about the whale. In particular, things like its Latin name, but also its average size, its average weight. So the viewer can walk around each table and be informed about the species. There are 2 different types of rivets in the project. The rivets that will appear on the key table in the Nightingale chart will actually be salvaged rivets from the workshops at Grytviken. And these whaling stations all had their own workshops to do repairs, and there's actually quite a stash of panhead rivets which are in the workshop stores, and I'm hoping to utilise these on the key table. The new rivets will be made from stainless steel, which will survive in that pretty harsh marine environment down by the harbour. And here's a little prototype of one here. So they'll have a kind of subtly reflective surface on them. I want visitors to feel contemplative about what's happened there, but also hopeful about the future. And one of the other interesting things about arranging these rivets is that they'll be seen probably quite far out in the bay as people come in on their boats. And I kind of like this idea of this anticipation of seeing something over in the distance, probably, hopefully, glistening in the sun, and kind of wondering what is this thing? Is this what is this? Is it kind of a scientific thing, or is it a technological thing? And then reaching the island, walking around these tables, being struck probably by the sheer quantities of creatures that were persecuted, but also the amazing recovery of these species as well. So it's a very visual thing. that hopefully will draw people into the story and hopefully capture their imagination and their hope. Well, this might sound glib, but this is a once in a lifetime experience, and just to be a small part of the story of change in South Georgia is a huge honour. So thank you.